Welcome. I'm Carol Christ. I'm the Vice Chancellor, and I'd like to welcome you to this second year and second occasion of the Writers at Work series. Also want to say Happy Halloween. We're a really diverse community at Berkeley. One of the things that's wonderful about being Vice Chancellor is you learn all the enormously varied things that people do on this campus. But one of the things that most of us share is that we're all writers. And one of the real valuable things about this series is how it brings people together to talk about one of the things that we share, which is writing. Writing, I think of as both a very private and a very public activity. It's how we communicate with the world, but it's also the way we write is something that's very private about each of us. You know, what kind of paper you use, what kind of pen you use, what you rely upon to get you through your first draft. We're all tend to be very personal things, and yet it's our speech to the world when it's out in front of the eyes of others. I'm not supposed to introduce Robin Lakoff, so I'm not going to do that. Glenda Hull is going to do that. But I want to say just a few words about her because I've known her almost since I've come to this campus. And she has some of the most interesting things to say about talking of anyone I've ever met. And I know that she's going to have really interesting things to say about writing. So welcome once more, and I'm delighted you're all here.
Thank you, Carol. I'm Glenda Hull and the current director of the college writing programs. And as that director, it's really a pleasure for me to look around the audience and to see so many college writing 1A students. It's our hope in the college writing programs that events like this one will encourage you to continue to develop your abilities and identities as writers. So welcome college writing 1A students and everyone else, of course, too. I'd like to introduce first Steve Tollefson, who will conduct the interview today. A longtime writing instructor on this campus, Steve is a former recipient of the Distinguished Teaching Award. Some of you know him through the many workshops that he's conducted around campus on teaching, on writing, and on language use. A writer as well, he is the author of Grammargrams and Grammargrams 2, which I heartily recommend to you and to anyone who needs to mix some humor and irreverence with their study of adverbs and participles and all things grammatical. I should tell you as well that Steve Tollefson is really the mastermind and organizer behind the Berkeley Writers at Work series. Without him, it certainly would not happen, and it would not happen so gracefully and efficiently, so thank you, Steve. Now it's my honor to introduce the writer of the hour and one of our nation's premier linguists, Robin Tolmach Lakoff. Professor Lakoff received her BA in Linguistics and Classics from Radcliffe, her MA in Classics and Linguistics from Indiana University, and her PhD in Linguistics from Harvard. She is now, as you would guess, Professor of Linguistics here at Berkeley, where she has taught for the past 25 years. Robin has lectured throughout the world, and she's regularly called upon to turn her linguist eye on current issues. Perhaps many of you, as I have, had the pleasure of flipping through the dial on the radio and all of a sudden hearing Robin Lakoff speaking about a variety of topics. She has recently written and spoken about such provocative issues as, and these are her titles, the O.J. Simpson case as an example of narrativity, the rise and fall to the power of N of Hillary Rodham Clinton, and also the Ebonics debate. I think that Robin first became a national figure with the publication of her 1975 book, Language and Women's Place. It truly did catapult her to national prominence. Now, in this book, she demonstrates the ways in which women's speech differs from men's speech, and she also shows us how women are discriminated against by the language that everyone uses. An excerpt from this book was reprinted in Ms. Magazine, and it's become a staple in high school and college anthologies for the last 2 decades. In another book, Face Value, The Politics of Beauty, written in 1984 with co-author Raquel Scher, Professor Lakoff explored what they call the problem of beauty and traced our fascination with beauty and its effects on our lives through myth, linguistic analysis, art, literature, and popular culture. One reviewer called this book sublimely ambitious. Other books include Talking Power, The Politics Linguistics of Language, and her most recent, written with James Cohen, Father Knows Best, The Use and Abuse of Power in Freud's Case of Dora, copies of which are available here. From Freud to beauty to issues of gender and power to popular culture, Robin Lakoff has demonstrated time and again how an astute analysis of language can lead to a more astute analysis and understanding of our culture and our world. I think one of her special contributions has been to call attention to linguistic imbalances which index social and political inequities, which we can then work to change. So it's indeed an honor to have her with us, so please join me in welcoming Robin Tolmach Lakoff.
Thank you, Glinda, for that wonderful introduction. I hope that I can be worthy of it. Some kids like to take things apart, like clocks or toasters or VCRs. Other bigger kids like to take people apart. I'm such a kid. We're called social scientists, although we're none too social, and a lot that we do isn't too scientific. In particular, linguists try to take people apart by taking apart their distinguishing glory, language. We see language as a window into the mind. The words and conversations that we make, when taken apart and put back together, tell us how we work. The passage I'm going to read from Talking Power is an example of how I take language apart. The premise of Talking Power is simple. We use language, among other things, to achieve and allocate power. We do so more or less consciously and at all levels, from friendly chit-chat to the State of the Union address. If this notion bothers you, it's because we pre-millennial Americans are uncomfortable about acknowledging our desire for power, rather as our fin de siècle ancestors were nervous about acknowledging their desire for sex. In particular, we play power games as members of public institutions, the government, the legal and medical systems, and not the least, the university. We play them both intramurally, among ourselves, and extramurally, with the general public, trying to convince them that we're benevolent and essential. We do both largely by language. One thing an institution needs to do is socialize its younger generation so it can take its place in time without disrupting the smooth, eternal functioning of the institution. In the university, the older generation is the faculty, the younger, the graduate students. Undergraduates, as I mentioned elsewhere in the same chapter of Talking Power, are but a byproduct of this process. How do we turn our graduate students into versions of ourselves? And how do we justify that process to ourselves? Those are the questions I'm thinking about here. So this is from the chapter in Talking Power, The Grooves of Academe. My department is at it again. Every 5 years or so we go through it, only to undo our work like Penelope with perfect regularity some 5 years later. We're fighting about revamping the department's graduate program, how many courses and which and in what order are to be required for the PhD. It always turns out to be a long drawn-out process, entailing almost as much internecine acrimony as our all-time favorite fighting issue, the hiring of new colleagues. And the real conflicts, the things that fill a simple process with dissension, are never brought out into the light of day. They remain covered while we debate superficialities. The curriculum committee, and academics do love committees, almost as much as we love subcommittees. They allow us to postpone the inevitable moment of climax, the decision. The curriculum committee has proposed a new course to be required of all graduate students in their first semester of residence for 1 unit. Most courses are 3 units or 4, meeting for 1.5 hours once a week, a very small commitment. Ordinarily, such small fish don't attract a great deal of discussion, pro or con. We reserve our verbal ammunition for the bigger stuff. But the proposed course is largely concerned with the underpinnings of the field, its ineffable mystique. It would cover, for instance, how to get articles published, how to write abstracts, where to look for bibliography, which journals are geared toward which subfields, the professional interests of the various faculty members of the department, and more and worse. How power is allocated in the field of linguistics, who has it, why, and how to get it. And why linguists are such a contentious group, why we can't listen to one another across theoretical boundaries, why scholarly arguments too often turn into personal vendettas. Everyone agrees that to receive a PhD in linguistics from the University of California at Berkeley, a student must demonstrate knowledge in a variety of topics. Sounds and sound systems, word formation and lexical semantics, syntax and sentence-level semantics, processes of historical change, methodology of various types, the claims of competing theories, and of course, much, much more. All this is the explicit and overt knowledge of the field, our public culture, as it were, what we transmit openly to the young and expect them to demonstrate proof of mastering. But that knowledge alone, however broad and deep, does not a competent professional linguist make. To be one, you not only have to know facts, theories, and methods, you have to know how to be a linguist, how to play by the rules. You have to know how to cite sources and which sources to cite, how to talk and how to write in terms of style, how to talk and how to write in terms of which questions may be legitimately raised and which, apparently equally attractive, may not, and what constitutes an answer. You have to know something about the history of the field, which in turn explains the politics of the field, who likes who and who hates who invites contributions from who in the volume who is editing, who is not invited, though working in the same area, and why. You must master the forms in terms of length, topic, and style, the abstract, the paper or article, the monograph, the book in writing, the job talk, the lecture, the panel contribution, among oral forms. These requirements exist in all academic fields, but each field does them differently and values them differently. In determining tenurability, some departments rank a single book higher than several articles, with about the same number of pages, others the reverse. It's useful to know these things, in fact, often vital for survival in an increasingly competitive business. But no one will tell you this, certainly not spontaneously. Some students know how to pick up a lot of underground stuff by judicious looking and listening. Others are sophisticated and brash enough to frame the questions and insist on answers from diffident mentors. But many are not, and it takes them years of agonizing in pre-tenure positions before they understand, too often, too late. We would be scandalized at a department that refused to tell its students about sentence construction or typological differences among languages. But we are, some of us, equally scandalized at a proposal to provide the second kind of information openly to all, in the guise of formal coursework. When the curriculum committee had submitted its lengthy proposal, the first and bitterest fight erupted over this peripheral one-unit course, whether, as they said, non-intellectual subject matter it should be taught at all. Now, curricular fights regularly break out over threats to hegemony and relative status. A professor who teaches syntax, for example, will bristle at any proposal to reduce a student's required load in that area. It diminishes the importance of the subfield and hence its practitioners' real and symbolic power. People fight over the number and kinds of proficiency examinations required, orals and written papers at the MA, PhD, and post-dissertation levels. These fights are about control. We must make it hard on our students to impress on them that a future in this field is worth struggling for, that the field is legitimate, that we take ourselves seriously. All of these decisions seriously affect a student's graduate career and perhaps ultimate success. It's understandable that sides are taken, arguments arise. But a one-hour fight about a one-unit course that threatens no one's preserve? Well, of course, there are reasons, and they are complex. One is simple. University people love to talk. We spew opinions at the slightest provocation. We argue just because it gets the blood flowing, reminding us that we have blood. But we do let some things pass, and this issue might have seemed fit for a bypass. We are, in fact, fighting about something much bigger than a proposed Linguistics 200 requirement, but no one says so. That would be vulgar. We are fighting about mystique. We're elders in the tribal sweat house, discussing the rites of initiation the next generation is to undergo. We went through them once. That's how we achieved our present esteemed status. They must, too, in their turn. We all agree on that. And we also agree pretty much that there are certain explicit skills the youth must know before they are deemed ready to take their place in adult society. But someone has raised an unheard of question. Should they be told the secrets? What happens during the ordeal? What is done and why it is done? It would make it easier for them. The suffering, which we all agree is essential, would make sense. It would be coherent. All the fasting, mutilation, deprivation. Why not enlighten them? But the oldest of the elders demurs indignantly. Don't we understand anything? The whole point is the mystery. The very senselessness gives the experience a special meaning, a curious depth, makes tribal membership of greater value. If they have to figure it out themselves by vague hints and overheard whispers through trial and error with pain and suffering, they will prize full membership when it is conferred all the more. The elders of the tribe must keep its mysteries holy. Any anthropologically sophisticated Westerner can understand that reasoning in a primitive tribe. But it's a little disconcerting to encounter ourselves at it. Ourselves, not only sophisticated Westerners, but intellectuals to boot. And more, intellectuals in an institution which claims as its territory the pursuit of knowledge by reason alone. Mystique has a place, but it's not the stuff of which scholarship is made. But reason alone cannot explain the passions of the argument over Linguistics 200. Like any other institution, the university has a complex mission, only some of which is supposed to be overtly visible, even to insiders. Therefore, its power relations are complex, and its communications to outsiders and to and among its members are more often than not obscure and ambiguous. In fact, the discourse of academe seems, and not only to non-initiates, especially designed for incomprehensibility. This is demonstrably true. But many of its ambiguities and eccentricities are intentional and intrinsic to the institution, not, as sometimes argued, mere side effects of the university's main communicative purpose.
Well, I hope that the applications to graduate school in linguistics don't drop off suddenly now. And those of you who are college writing students know that it's exactly the same for the next 4 years. It's not just graduate school that acts that way. I'm thrilled to be able to talk to you today, Robin. I'm very nervous, though, and I thought I should read a passage that explains why I'm nervous. This is from Talking Power, and I'll just launch into it. She, tell me how to fix this Xerox machine. He, oh, don't you worry about that, honey, leave it to me. Now the shoe is on the other foot. This vignette illustrates one way that men maintain control over women, by reducing their self-confidence. On the surface, he is being polite and considerate. He's saving her time and energy by doing the job himself. The honey offers intimacy and caring. But look again. The hidden message he is conveying is that she would not benefit from being told how to do it herself, which would give her power in the future. She wouldn't need to keep asking him for help. She probably couldn't do it anyway. Fixing machinery is a man's job. Her only hope is to be able to cajole him into helping her each time she encounters a snag. She has to rely on him. Her functioning is dependent on his goodwill. And now the shoe is on the other foot once again, and today I depend on Robin's goodwill to get me through this and to make sure that I don't ask anything really stupid. There is nothing worse than talking to someone who talks about how we talk and having her judge every question.
You know, people,
you're laughing now.
People always worry about that, you know, when they learn that I'm a linguist and they say, oh, are you listening to the way I talk? And, you know, if I feel like being intimidating, of course, I say, well, every word, every syllable, and you will get a written précis in the mail. You know? But in fact, we don't. We can't. It's impossible to interact and judge at the same time. You know, you have only one brain at a time, if you're lucky. And so do not worry.
That does not give me any confidence, but I'll take it for what it's worth. I want to start sort of simply with what I call word associations, and except I want more from you. I'm going to give you the words. You give me a sentence or two about them. Typewriter versus computer.
Okay. This is interesting to me because you very often, if you listen to the radio and writers are being interviewed, they're asked, how do you write? Do you write on a typewriter or a computer? And it's interesting to me how the mystique of the typewriter survives. I sort of think a century ago, writers in the same position were asked, well, not maybe a century, were asked, do you write by pen or typewriter? And they probably said, oh, pen, because, you know, the feeling of the pen directly from hand to brain, you know, is such a stirrer of inspiration. And very often people who say typewriter today talk the same way. I did until I got my first computer. And what I find is that, and I am the biggest Luddite in the world. I am major Luddite. You know, it's a miracle I can tie my shoes or anything. But I still find that writing on the computer, because it saves both physical labor, literally, you know, the physical effort of pressing on typewriter keys, and all the pain and annoyance of crossing things out and rewriting them and cutting and pasting and just all that, really, I think, frees me to do more actual writing. So I'm definitely a computer person in this.
I'm listening to the noise outside. We can do two things at once, listen to you and listen to the noise. It's unfortunate that today, of course, is Halloween and before yet another big, important game for us, so I assume the band will be marching through any moment, and Robin and I will do something in response, I'm sure. Next word, proofreading.
Proofreading is what I hate. I detest editing, and one of the things I've had to learn, you know, with more difficulty than almost anything else in the course of maybe learning how to write, is that you have to proofread and you have to edit. And I do not use a spell checker because it's more annoying than helpful, I find. And I certainly don't use a grammar checker because, you know, I am the syntactician here. Nobody is going to tell me, no stupid machine is going to tell me how to write a sentence. But yes, you do have to proofread, and there is no way for it not to be obnoxious.
I should go into my list, but I have to ask you about the grammar checker. What do you think about grammar checkers for others less skilled than yourself?
You know, I don't know how helpful those things are really, because they're mechanical, they can't really understand what you're getting at. And I kind of think that the more interesting your style, perhaps a little eccentric, the less good the grammar checker is going to be for you. You know, it will say, I don't know what they say, you have too many words in this sentence, or you have used the word the too often, or too often for who. No, you've said who, not whom. Oh, bad. Oh. And I think, I'm not sure that that does a whole lot of good.
Next word, deadlines.
Something else I've gotten worse about over the years. This comes with the excess of power. When I was young, when I was a graduate student, and somebody said, you have to have this paper in next week, it was in next week. Lately, well, over the last 20 years or so, I've discovered that I don't have to do that, and people will wait. And I've really gotten very snappy about that sometimes, as long as I figure I can get away with it.
But you aren't recommending that to our students.
No, not to my students. No.
Or mine.
I'm very awful to my students. I make them hand things in on time.
You're
look,
more
I
cruel
talk
than
about
I
power.
thought.
I write about power. This is the laboratory demonstration of power.
Next set, process or product?
In what sense?
Of your writing. Do you enjoy the process or the product more?
There are parts of the process I like. I like, because the way I sort of come up with things, I just, you know, maybe I am a big old Luddite after all, because I really do get ideas together with a pencil and lined paper. And I like that part of the process a lot, just kind of putting things together and seeing if I can make an outline, which is what I do. Make things cohere. And I like writing the first draft because it's nice to see that outline translated into something intelligible. But second draft, well, I just said editing is loathsome, and I don't like doing that. And, well, I like having written this. I think it was Gloria Steinem who said, it's nice to see that manuscript in its nice little envelope or box waiting to get sent off into the world. But you know, there's always a kind of bittersweet sense, and there's always, then when the book finally comes out, there's always kind of a horrifying sense of, gee, I could have done that better. But yeah, it's good to get a thing done.
So, but you sound like you suffer, as many writers do, from sort of postpartum depression.
Yeah.
When the book comes out.
Very much the same kind of thing.
Outlining versus what we call in the hip world of composition business, free writing.
I was taught, I had a very good high school education, and I was taught to outline in what they called Harvard outline form, which they never called it that at Harvard, I guess. But this is the one where you start with Roman numeral 1 and then big letter A indented, and then Arabic 1 and then little a, and so on and so on. And we were made to outline both the reading that we did for homework, and during classroom discussion we were made to outline that. And since the high school was both junior high and high school, this was 6 years of outlining everything. So I do that. By now it's natural to me, and I find it freeing, actually, maybe because I started so early and it's so natural to me. But once I have that outline, in the same way that when I talk, when I lecture, whether it's this kind of thing or a classroom, I write my lecture out in full, even if I'm, which I often do, abandon it when I'm about to give it. But just the fact that I have something there on paper means that if panic sets in halfway through, and I think, oh my God, I don't know where I'm going, what am I going to say next, what's happening here, I can look at that outline on the piece of paper, and I will know where I am and what I ought to be getting to next. So I do it to avoid panic, really, more than anything.
I noticed the verb you used to talk about what you did in high school is that we were made to outline rather than we got
Yeah.
to
Oh, it was
outline.
not a natural thing. They made us do it. They made us do lots of things back then.
We won't. We're going to stick to the writing, okay?
Those things.
One final one, and this is really for my students. Who, sentence fragments.
I use them, but you see, this is the thing. When you have a PhD, kids, you can do anything you want. And when you have tenure, you can do everything else you want. So the day you get tenure, you can use fragments, you can use run-ons, you can have dangling modifiers, you can do anything like that. But until that day, you must not do those evil things.
As you see, she was trying there to help me, but in fact,
Not
I
a
tried
lot.
to convince mine that sentence fragments have a purpose and can be okay. I know that if there are high school teachers out here, you're wishing we would stop talking now.
Corrupting the youth again.
I'd like to move on. I have sort of a chronology of things I'd like to talk about. And so first, to talk a little bit about what you do when you actually start writing. And I thought maybe the easiest thing would be to find out where you do most of your writing.
Okay, I write at home. I can never do anything creative in the office for a variety of reasons, because one, the refrigerator isn't near enough. And I have a room set aside for religious purposes of this kind. And what I do, it's a regular desktop computer. It sits on the desk, and I go and I sit there and I turn it on, and then the cat who is outside yells that he wants to come in, so then I have to get up and let him in. And then as soon as I start writing, he walks across the keyboard a few times and does a critique, and then goes and has to be let out, so I have to get up and let him out. And then I sit down and start writing again, and then he meows and I have to let him in. And this can go on for a while.
Well, this sounds...
how it's done.
It doesn't sound much different than graduate students at your door at your office, though.
Yeah, but this way, at least I know who my boss is.
And I think you slipped something in there that I noticed some people in the audience going, and that is the refrigerator is closer, because I know that most people think that someone of your your stature just sits down and writes and doesn't think about anything else like, you know, food or cleaning the house or straightening up, that you just sit down and produce. And that's true, right?
Oh, absolutely. But on the other hand, you do need inspiration. And I find the refrigerator very inspirational. And, you know, actually, the only thing I hate worse than editing is cleaning the house. But one of the few things that will make me clean the house is having to write. So, you know, all these things kind of have to come together. I need that stimulating environment in order to be able to do anything at all.
If you, we're assuming that the room that you've set up for these religious purposes is the place that you like best, but if you could have any setup for your writing in any place, where would it be? What would it be?
Chez Panisse.
For the students in our college writing programs, that's the fancy restaurant in Berkeley, and then the question has to be upstairs or downstairs.
Oh, downstairs, of course.
Downstairs, okay.
Inspiration is inspiration. Religion is religion.
But can you, or do you, write anywhere? Can you write in? Let's do the can
no.
you.
I really, I admire people very greatly who can write or even read on airplanes. The minute I get on a plane, my mind just goes, you know, thunk into the baggage compartment. I can't, as I say, I can't write in my office because there are just infinite distractions, and specifically distractions I can't control. I like distractions that I can control. I can write, I do my longhand writing, you know, actually sitting in bed. I read once as a child that Amy Lowell, the poet, did her writing sitting in bed under a black umbrella, smoking a black cigar, I believe. And I haven't quite incorporated the latter two things. But I find, you know, sitting, you know, in comfortable surroundings is good for getting the first ideas. But then I like the idea of a computer on a desktop, you know, which is kind of austere and kind of says we're working here. And kind of, you know, seems to work for me that way.
Are you disciplined
Nah.
when you write?
Oh, no. Well, I see, when I'm actually writing, when I'm doing first draft, I guess I like that. You know, it's such a sexy thing that, you know, I want to keep on doing it until, you know, I'm finished. But you know, I find that I can, you know, do a lot of writing. It doesn't feel like something requiring discipline to me. On the other hand, if it's something I don't like so much, you know, then I really do have to, you know, twist my arm, which makes writing harder.
Especially if that's your writing arm.
You know, this is my writing hand. I'm one of them lefties.
So do you have then, it sounds like you don't have any self-imposed writing rules, and by that I don't mean grammar rules, I mean number of pages that you need to accomplish in a day, or time, number of hours you spend. And
I've always thought I should, that it would be better if I were more disciplined, but it's too late now. And I sort of write until I feel that I have said what I came to the computer to say earlier. And, you know, and depending on what's on Oprah that afternoon, or, you know, other important things that I might have to do, which regulate my time.
so again, I'm thinking of the students. No, I'm thinking of some of the staff who are here too. Remember, don't take all of
I'm
these
a very
things
bad
as the
influence.
law on exactly. I mean, the Oprah.
Horrible.
You know, I worry about that.
No, do as I don't do. Don't do as I don't say.
Have you always liked to write? I mean, I'm assuming you like to write. We
Yeah,
didn't get
yeah.
to that part.
No, I do. I wouldn't
Have
do
you-
it if I didn't.
Have you always liked to?
I think so. I mean, as far back as I can remember, as soon as I, you know, learned the mechanics of writing, I was trying to write. I remember when I was in 5th grade, one of the boys in my class and I had a contest about who could write the longest novel. I won. My mother said I should let him win, but I didn't.
that just shows that we can't divorce this discussion of process from content, which I think is important. Can you remember the first thing you wrote that you liked?
Let's see. That has never happened.
I'll just move on then. Thank you from that.
Well, all right. I don't know. No, that has never
Okay,
happened.
that has never. Influences. Influences on your writing, people, books, and writers who you admire.
The first people, my father has a great collection of humorous books. He likes, he had a lot of Thurber and S.J. Perelman and stuff like that around. And I think that was one significant thing. Another, again, this high school where they made me do things. They made me take Latin, which I at first did under protest, but then I discovered that I liked it a lot. And when I was 15, I guess it must have been, that was the year that we read Cicero, and we read a lot of Cicero, and I think that that is the single greatest influence on my style. Ever since then, I have been trying to put ablative absolutes into English, which is no easy task, I can assure you. But I've also, for a while, I think I was producing English that was virtually unreadable, because Latin style does not work in English, and particularly not in contemporary English. So I had to sort of undo a lot of that, but I think it's still there.
For those of you who wonder perhaps why Latin style doesn't, I do recommend Talking Power. There's a section in there on how we have ended up with the grammar rules and regulations that we have ended up with in English, and it should be very revealing if you don't know where those things come from. I have just a couple of questions about your research and how you keep track. For those, again, who've read any parts of these books, you know that Robin covers a huge territory in any given book. References to all kinds of things that may not immediately strike you as something that you would have come up with. So my question is, how do you keep track of the research, and how do you know where it is when you need to pull it up?
So I wish I had something really useful and authoritative to say, like I have a perfect indexing system and wonderful files, but I don't. I have manila folders in a filing cabinet, and if I'm writing something of any length, I have one folder for each chapter in it. If it's just a single paper, then a single folder. And I sort of throw into that folder everything, whether it's copies of articles that I want to use, or references, or notes to myself about what to include. And then when I get to writing that, I take the folder out and typically don't find what I thought I had in there. I really keep saying to myself, someday I've got to get organized, but I don't.
You mentioned notes to yourself. Do you write things down, those kinds of notes, during the day? Yep. at random times? And do you have like if you're like me, you have a notebook but you never use it. I just have slips of paper tucked here and there.
Yeah, I have things on old envelopes, like the Gettysburg Address. I have I sort of have a clipboard that sometimes I do. See, this is a deep secret. I always tell people that they don't watch enough television, and I, watch lots and lots of garbage on television. But one reason is that it's kind of a source of thoughts. Maybe because the garbage on television is so awful that I have to think about something else. And so, as I'm doing that, as I'm doing the dishes, as, all the ephemera of the day, I find myself scribbling down ideas in the middle of the night.
Well, you've leapt to my next question. What happens in the middle of the night? My question was, do you ever wake up in the middle of the night with an idea?
Yes.
And if so, do you just go, oh, too bad, I'm not going to get up, or do you?
It depends, I guess, on how important I think the idea is and what kind of mood I'm in. Sometimes I will actually turn on the light, and I have that clipboard within reach, and I scribble something down on it. There's that story about, was it Dorothy Parker or somebody who sort of woke up in the middle of the night and thought she had, the idea that explained all of human civilization as we know it, and scribbled something down. And in the morning she got up, and what she had written was higamus, hogamus, men are monogamous, hogamus, higamus, men are polygamous, higamus, hogamus, women monogamous. So there's a danger in late night inspiration.
Oh, it sounds like a good summary to me. I'd like to talk about audience for a minute, and I need to read from one of these books, a little piece. As you see, my filing system is very much like hers, but there is color coding going on here, so I know where I'm going. This is from Face Value, The Politics of Beauty, and I need to read it to you just because there is a little point I want to make here. When we speak of beauty, of standards and gradations of beauty, we are necessarily speaking metaphorically rather than precisely. And metaphor resists definition, is in a sense its antithesis. The moon is not, after all, definable as a ghostly galleon. And when I read that, I was so pleased with myself because I knew what she was referring to, a poem by Alfred Noyes that begins, "The moon is a ghostly galleon."
The Highwayman.
The Highwayman. And I can do the whole thing, and I won't do that to you. But my question then was, what assumptions do you make about your audience? I got that reference. Is it important that everyone gets that reference? I'm sure there are a lot of references I didn't get.
Well, I think I write for myself, really, in a very egocentric process. And I figure that if I get it, that's all I need to know.
I didn't mean this day to turn into yet another college writing students. No. So I feel like this is the point where I say, are there questions from the audience, because we're about done. No.
No, I don't mean to be subversive or anything.
And but you write for yourself, but you're writing stuff that you want people to read, so there's sort of a disjunction there. And how do you justify putting those kinds of things in?
Well, okay, maybe I don't only write for me, but I write for someone who I think has had the same range of experience that I have. And, somebody who has had an education at an excellent school, such as the University of California at Berkeley, who, now, the way, I guess I did read The Highwayman as a student in the same high school. They made us read that. But also, I seem to recall that when we were learning in our English class about metaphor and simile and metonymy and all them, the particular example that was selected out was the moon was a ghostly galleon as an example of metaphor, and my love is like a red, red rose as an example of simile. And I guess I sort of assumed this was a universal reference, that everybody has that particular one in their Harbrace handbook, which is what we had. So maybe it's more universal than it seems.
Well, it better be with my students. What would you like your audience to be?
Interested, I guess. Wanting to, make that leap to sort of see how their mind and my mind sort of come together. Not totally persuaded that I'm right before they start reading, but willing to engage in a little argumentation, sort of keeping their minds kind of snappy as they read.
Are there people that you don't think you reach in your books? Who are they?
Conservatives, for instance. I think almost anything I say about almost anything would make William F. Buckley roll his eyes. Or any of those guys. I think people with basically those kinds of values, I think, shouldn't read what I write.
Or should they read what you write?
No, it would be medically bad. Given the state of healthcare, they really shouldn't.
I'm not sure how to phrase this. Just one more on that same kind of thing, the kind of reference that you make. In one section, I know some people have to leave because it's one. We're going to have like another 10 minutes or so of my questions, and then I'll leave some time so that you can ask Robin some questions. But I have just a couple more things I really want to ask her. In one section of one of your books, you go from Greek myth to Baudelaire to Gilbert and Sullivan's The Mikado, to Sid Vicious of the Sex Pistols, and later to Vogue, Garbo, and Surrealism, all in fairly short space of time. I guess the question is, how does that come to you? Where do you get the references? How do you get those references out of your mind onto the page? How do you know when it's the right thing? Is it just the watching television that does it for you?
Well, that's where I get all my Greek mythology, off Jeopardy, of course. You have to remember that Face Value was a collaboration. And in many ways, one of the things I like about collaborating is that you do bring sort of two databases to bear. So the things that I know were one set of things, and the things that Raquel knew are others. I think Baudelaire was probably hers, and Tiresias was probably mine. And I don't know who Sid Vicious, who invited him. But somehow between the two of us, we could produce a greater array of connections. And I think one reason that I like to do that is that it kind of enlarges the scope. People who might not respond to Baudelaire might respond to Sid Vicious, and vice versa.
Let's jump to co-authors then, because I did have a couple of questions I wanted to ask, and you've partially answered one of them. That is, what's the best thing? Again, for those of you who don't know, I think three of your books you've done with other people. And often people at the university are asked as part of reports or as students or staff to work with other people on producing a document. So what for you is the greatest joy of working with a co-author?
Well, one thing, people always say, and I think it's true, that writing is a lonely activity. And lonely in particular because you write something and often you really don't have any idea if it's any good, if another human being will understand it. Can you make that connection? And a good thing about collaboration is that there is always someone out there who can say, yes, I get it, or no, you better fix that. And then secondly, another difficult part of the writing process is that sooner or later, as you're writing away, it's going to happen that you will hit a snag and everything will seem to blow up in your face and it'll be horrible. And you're sure you will never get this thing written. It will never come together. And it's, you have to go through this as part of the writing process. It's kind of like you have to go through labor if you want to have a kitty at the end. And it's awful. There's no way to make that appreciably better. But if you have a collaborator, you can say to the collaborator, oh gosh, this is terrible. We are never going to write a book. And if your collaborator hopefully isn't quite at that point at the same time you are, and they'll say, oh no, this is fine, we can work with it, it works just great, and they'll get you through it. And then, day or a week later, they'll go through the same thing and you can get them through it. And so it's a leveling and evening out process. And then, at least if it's a good and healthy collaboration, it's fun. When Mandy and I were writing When Talk Is Not Cheap, the way we did that, we literally sat at the typewriter, the computer rather, together. The worst of it was the first computer experience for both of us, and we were learning to master WordStar, which is how long ago that was. And that was absolute agony. But on top of that, there was the writing, and we would throw sentences. One of us would be writing, and the other would sort of hurl sentences at them, and then they would hurl them back. And it was fun, We really had a good time, and it was amusing as well as enlightening.
if Mandy hadn't left, by the way, her co-author was here earlier, but had to leave. I wouldn't ask this next question if she hadn't left, and that is, what's the worst thing about working with someone?
Well, the worst thing is it may happen that you and your collaborator, discover somewhere in the middle of things that you don't see eye to eye, that the book that you had in mind isn't the book that they had in mind, and you can't, work though you may, you can't reconcile it. Other things that could happen, it could be that either you or your collaborator is an immature person. Now, writing a book is like being married for that length of time, or being in a close relationship. And among the things that can happen, you don't get along, that somebody, wants something that the other person can't give them, that there is something about the communication that is abusive in one direction or the other. And those things can happen in a collaboration just as in any other friendship, marriage, anything else. So that can happen, and fortunately I have never been in a really awful situation like that, but I've certainly heard tales of where lawyers get involved and very bad things happen. So there's a risk.
But you have generally had good experiences with your co-authors. We won't probe anymore, but we may want to later. I want to talk about two or three other things. One is your humor, which I think is obvious today from everyone. But there are a couple of places I'd like to read to give other people more of a sense. That the books are filled with humor, which I will explain to you how I've categorized it. I've done a careful analysis, and she has several kinds, and we'll talk. I wanted to read you just one. This is when Robin was on a capital murder trial in Oakland, and this is just her description of one small part. The Alameda County Jury Assembly Room does little to inspire faith in the American way of justice. The clerk at the front begins the first day of service by taking attendance, the first in a long series of infantilizing procedures, and follows with an instructive lecture about the privilege of being a juror, including information that if you happen to forget to come in when called, a bench warrant will be issued for you. Furthermore, don't try to park in this area, nor do we provide parking for jurors. Jury duty is a precious part of American freedom. Don't come late. Don't leave possessions unattended. If you need proof of service for your boss, the form has to come from the clerk. A brief videotape is shown about what jurors do, though not nearly enough to make courtroom business intelligible. Almost every page of your books, I can find something that is a mild aside like these that help us to understand what's going on. Sometimes the humor seems to be simply a way of breaking up something that's being said. You refer at one point to Freud and Dora's father as being men who loved to smoke cigars, and you put in parentheses, in this case, I guess a cigar was just a cigar. You talk about the glint in the eyes of the judge when he realized that you would be impaneled on the jury. The thing you read at the very beginning about reminding us that we have blood So my question is, we have all these different kinds, and it goes from fairly mild to biting, and I would assume that a lot of people new at the academic business don't feel that humor is appropriate. So defend yourself.
Well, first of all, life, as you know, is tragic, so we have to tell jokes in order to get through it. We have to find the funny parts, which fortunately are many. Academics, if you go on reading in the Grooves of Academe chapter, I am an academic, my name is Robin and I'm an academic, and I admit it, and there are a lot of, well, just as with any institution, there's a sort of institutional picture of how we have to be. And there are things about how academics are supposed to have to be that I could really do without. And one of them is that we need to be serious. We need to be objective. We need not to interject our emotions and our personal stuff into our serious scholarly work. I feel, though, that any way we can kind of use our ideas to reach people, that we can reach out and touch someone, and we can, lighten things up in order to make things more readable is the ultimate duty of the academic. You know, the worst thing that can happen as a member of this institution is that you end up writing such that only 3 other people can read it. There's a lot of that going around, I know, but I think that's part of the reason that universities are in some of the difficulties that we're in. So, you know, certainly I have colleagues who feel that if you write anything that somebody on the outside could read or even like, that in itself is worthy of censure. But, you know, I think we got to get over that if we're going to survive at all.
Well, that's such a perfect place to end, but we can't. Because you made it sound like your humor is so nice and uplifting.
Yeah.
And it's not.
I'm a nice person, really.
That you're just always a nice person.
Yeah.
Your humor can be biting. When you said reach out and touch someone, I pictured sort of a snake. A few times. The end of the section you were reading on the university at the beginning, wonderful section on how people communicate at the university, and ends with the surprise that people at the university don't communicate as well as you would think, given that language is our commodity. Our power, our authority is intertwined with our ability to maintain secrets even as we seem to dispense them. We write and speak, but we do not communicate. That is our art. And talking about being in the doctor's office, and the receptionist says doctor is running late. I'm cutting to the middle here. And in most cases examined, the game is won by hidden means. No receptionist says, I want you to know that Dr. Snarf considers you vermin and you should be glad that he lets you wait in his office at all. So, how about the biting side?
Well, okay. I mean, yes, there are power games, injustices, bad behavior in the world. And I kind of, you know, me and Johnny Swift, we like to sort of say things about that. And we have our ways. And I think, you know, if there is something worth biting, you should bite it.
Final question. Are there things that you wish you had never written?
Oh, probably. Nah, not really. I don't think there's anything I would actively disown. I mean, for instance, if I were writing Talking Power today, I mean, not Talking Power, if I were writing Language in Woman's Place today, I wouldn't write Language in Woman's Place today. But, so in that sense, the field has changed, and therefore my thinking has changed, and therefore the ideas that I had then, I would not any longer, you know, many of them I wouldn't have now. On the other hand, if I hadn't said the things I did then, I don't think I would be able to be talking about the things I do today. So, you know, I couldn't cut anything out. You know, if you get into a time machine, one of the rules are that you cannot change anything in the world of the past that you go back to, because that could affect, you know, your present world in ways you can't possibly imagine. So I better not change anything I ever wrote.
We won't. Questions? We have maybe 10 minutes that people should feel free to ask.
I'm interested in how you'd like to see academic writing change. Do you think that academic writers should aim towards a broader audience, more entertainment in their writing, or specifically, what would you like to see?
And the question is, how should academic writers aim to write? Should they write in a more popular and accessible way? And I think the answer is yes. Now, there are cases, there are kinds of academic writing that really are pretty arcane and really are just for a small public of other specialists. And we can let those writings be as unreadable as they currently are. But I think most of us, certainly in the social sciences, certainly most of what we do, if we're doing anything worth it at all, if we justify our paychecks, what we're doing should have some relevance to people outside, you know, to the world at large. And I think it's absolutely our duty to learn how to express those ideas so that people outside can read them without undue suffering. Because, you know, if we believe that the institution of the university deserves to survive, we have to prove our relevance to the world outside of us. And the way we have to do that, I think, is to write so as to explain ourselves.
Being an undergraduate, my question that I'd like to pose is, how do you get through the university system and still stay true to yourself while still doing what you got to do? Because, you know, it seems like we have so little time to do all the things that are presented in front of us. How do you continue to stay true to yourself, and how did you do that in your
So
past?
the question is, how, as an undergraduate, do you stay true to yourself
Yeah.
with all of the competing demands on your attention?
Exactly.
One way, which you unfortunately can't do, is to be a woman and an outsider of the institution, or in general to be an outsider. I think a member of an ethnic minority, for instance, or you know, a social class that typically is not a member of the university, people who come in from outside, I think, often find it easier to maintain their, you know, their sense of self. On the other hand, they also have extremely strong pressures on, you know, not to. But I think one way to do it is, you know, to understand that on the one hand, you know, you have these obligations that you have to fulfill. You have these courses to take, and these exams, and these papers, and you have to do them. But you sort of have to keep a little piece of yourself aside. You have to set aside time, impossible as I know that is. But, you know, a little bit of time each week just to do something totally frivolous, totally something that you do because it's fun to do. Because I think fun is a good way to discover who you really are, you know, what the real you wants to do.
Other questions?
I'm just kind of interested in how you handle writing in terms of blocks of time. I noticed in huge variety there was people who sit down, they just write straight for hours. There are others who set aside an hour, 45 minutes, and they can break. Are you one of those? It sort of sounds like you're one of those who needs to stir every 25, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Even.
So how do I arrange my time when I'm writing? Do I do it in big chunks or, you know, in little pieces? And what I find is that I have to have a long block of time. I mean, I can't get I can't get any serious writing done during the academic year when I have to teach. Even though, you know, like this semester I have this nice Tuesday, Thursday schedule. So in theory, I should have huge blocks of time, at least a couple of days a week. But there's always something. Like, here I am, and it's Friday, you know. But you know, I'm glad to be here. But you know, there's always, you have to do the shopping, and you have to go to a meeting, and you have to go to another meeting, and you know. So I certainly have colleagues who say, well, I have 2 hours today, and I can sit down at the computer and write a chapter. I can't do that. I can only if I know I have, not only that day, but I have a whole expanse of a week, let's say, with nothing much to do, then I can, you know, fit in blocks of time on my own during that week. And, you know, maybe it will only be a couple of hours a day. In fact, I can't really sit at the computer and write more than maybe 3 hours maximum. I mean, I should say I'm pretty efficient. When I write for 3 hours, I turn out, oh, I don't know, like 10 or 12 single-spaced pages, which are, you know, moving toward final draft form, though not by any means there. So, I mean, when I finally do get down to it, I am pretty efficient at it, but I really need that huge block of time, you know, to sort of pace around the apartment and commune with the cat and make the phone call and make grocery lists and all the other more or less time-wasting things that sort of get me into the right frame of mind, so that when I have finally exhausted every possible way of wasting time, I then know I have to sit down at the computer and I've got to do it, but I have to have had that bunch of time before that. So, you know, not the best way to do it, but what I do.
Other questions? We have one more.
I have a question about the passage you read
very interesting, and I very much liked your anthropological take on the years to tank. My question is, isn't this an initiation rite that comes on top of an initiation rite, the long years towards the PhD? How does that, if you could explain maybe how that fits into the framework?
How is what an initiation right on top of?
Well, just simply getting the PhD.
Oh, okay.
And negotiating your way through a department.
Yeah.
Finding the right mentor. Completing a thesis. Getting the degree, which nowadays takes quite a bit of time.
Yep.
And you need to learn certain political skills, I think, to get to that final point. What then happens when there is then another long initiation, almost biblical, 7 years before you get to the point?
When you mean when you're an assistant professor and you don't have tenure
right.
yet?
And if the goal is to use your academic skills and to reach to the community, what happens if you have most of the years of your young adulthood negotiating those obstacles? When is it? I mean, do you then learn then how to reach out into the community, or are you learning something entirely different so that by the time you get there, what then is what then happens to what you're doing professionally?
Okay, that's a very astute question. If we are supposed to be able to communicate with the real world, as I was suggesting earlier, what does this very long and very difficult initiation process that we put our graduate students through, how does that render that ultimate ideal maybe more difficult? And you're quite right that the initiation I mentioned, that is the one leading to the PhD, is only initiation number one. And then you get your PhD, and wow, you're going to go out into the outside world. You're a genuine doctor, and then you discover, because you have to be an assistant professor for 6 or 7 years. You don't have tenure, and you kind of have to go through the same process for that same length of time all over again. And actually, I think what's interesting about your question is that, yes, that's precisely why we are so bad at communicating with the world. That we do, in fact, what we use that long process for is socialization. And part of the thing, one of the things my department is always worried about, and I think many departments as well, is our graduate students are taking too long to reach the PhD. I think ours are now something unconscionable like 8 years. And yet, at the same time, we sort of like it like that, even though we deny that absolutely. And what we like about it is it gives us lots of time to mold the clay exactly as we like it. And then, of course, when they're assistant professors, they have to be on their best behavior for 6 or 7 years, because they don't want to offend anyone that might be voting on their tenure. So by the time they get out of this, let's say, 15-year process, we pretty much have them where we want them. And this is, I'm afraid, what we like.
We need to stop there, but Robin will be, she doesn't know this, but she will hang around for a couple of minutes. I knew there was something I forgot to tell her, so that you can ask her questions individually. Two quick announcements. February 2nd, Berkeley Writers at Work will be featuring Professor Nancy Shepherd-Hughes, and in the fall we hope it will be Professor Arlie Hochschild. There are copies of Father Knows Best on the table for sale by ASUC. And I want to thank you so much, Robin. This has been wonderful. I've learned so much, and I want to thank you all for coming.
Well, thank you.